I hate to say it'll be worse under Labour, but it will be a lot worse under Labour. There's a lot of us wanting to give the Tories a kicking. I think they'll get that kicking, much deserved, but we shouldn't be celebrating that. Labour will really go for us. What I want to talk about here is how I think Labour will end up increasing mass immigration quite a lot further than its current high, and then being very repressive about it. I think they'll do it for basic philosophical, political reasons of hatred, reasons of dominance, a feeling that they have to appeal to the invaders in order to protect them from the voting wrath of the native British or English public. I think crucially they will perceive it as an economic necessity to do so. I think they will do it. They may allow it to continue to plateau for a year or two. Then I think they will increase it. And when they do that, I think they will deal with the bad feeling about it, the backlash against it, in a very repressive manner. So I want to deal with that here. It is bad news. Get ready for the bad news. Now, the plea here, the overall plea, the background plea to this is at some stage we are going to have to make the decision to cut the umbilical cord with the state and to say, I don't care how many hospital appointments, free hospital appointments you fix. I don't care how many benefits the local council claim to give out. I don't care how much drip feed money and how fast the money flows up the nose tube. It isn't worth it for what you're doing to me. I would rather look after myself. At some stage, we're going to have to do that. And that matters because the lost towns, cities and districts and areas, the ghettoized, balkanized areas, they can be got hold of again. They can be reclaimed. We can take those back. The invader populations, they can be repatriated, they can be remigrated. That is fairly straightforward. That I think it will prove fairly easy to accomplish. What is not easy to get over is the sense, the shame of willing participation in that abuse perpetrated against us by our enemy authorities, simply because we want the freebie, the flow of freebies to continue a bit longer. That is a kind of a stain that you just can't get away, you can't get rid of through political action. And so in saying it's going to get a lot worse, it is not because I want to depress everyone. Partly is I think we might as well face up to reality. The reality is there, face it. But it's also to show the implication, which is we need to try and we need to cut our addiction to and our dependence upon the state authority. Okay, this is the bad situation as it is. This is the grim news. How many people come to the UK and how salary rules changing, blah-de-blah-de. This is a BBC report. Let me zoom out a bit on that. Hold on. There, if you about the same as it was then. Okay, migration, that's net migration. They always use net migration because it's a way of hiding our replacement. What you need to look at is total number, or primarily is total numbers coming in. What you'll see is last year, up to December 2022, it was 1.25, 1.25 million people coming in. And December 2023, it was about 1.2. So it went down very slightly. That's a plateau. So if you look at those figures going from 91 up to the end of 2023, it's still very high. It's plateauing. You can see that better if I show you that from the ONS. Then that is the same data, only going from, not from 91, but from 2012. And it shows basically the figures levelling off. What I'm saying, I think Labour might continue that level off number there, that the Tories have just ramped up so hard, that Labour might continue to level it off for a year or two. Then after a while, I think they're going to increase it, and it's going to start shooting towards the ceiling again. I think it will hit 2 million a year. That figure I've more or less plucked out of the air. That was from Rishi Sunak when he said that migrants to this country can yield £4 billion a year for the health service if we charge them each £2,000 a year. Well, 4 billion divided by 2,000, that is 2 million. So that's 2 million a year. I think we're going to see that 2 million figure under Labour. Maybe not immediately though. Now, the first reason I think is a basic philosophical outlook. I think Labour are even more keen on mass immigration than the other side of the uniparty, the Tories are. I think whereas the Tory, they are all a collective enemy of us. The purpose of mass immigration is to grind us down. It is to put us in fear, to make us more poverty-stricken, impoverished, and therefore more dependent on the state, ultimately to make us more manageable, easier to rule, which gives them more power over us. That is the purpose of it. They both want that. I think the difference between Labour and Tories is that Labour are going all in with the invaders because they see them as the only way to protect themselves. They've gone so far down the road of enemy behaviour and importing invaders that they need to they see those invaders now as the people who will protect them from the white British population, particularly the electoral wrath, but also other forms of anger from the British public. So they're throwing their lot right in with these people that they actually kind of see as their saviours. And you can see that in the way that they grovel to the invaders. You might have seen this, quite a few of you will have seen this from Angela Rayner in her constituency, crawling and grovelling to a room full of Muslim men. I won't play it here, but play it yourself. That's, if you just look up Angela Rayner promised that Labour will do everything in its power to end the suffering in Gaza. It is really degrading. There is something very almost fetishistic about what she's doing. Turn the sound off and watch it and tell me you don't think she's getting some kind of kinky thrill out of grovelling to all those bristling macho invader men. And that's on the kinky side of the Labour Party. I mean, on the other end here, you've got, if I just bring it up, this lady here. Let me just shut her up. That's Emma Reynolds. She's on the lemon-sucking end of the Labour Party, the puritanical end. And what she's saying is, I will always stand against Islamophobia and seek to bring communities together. So she's not going to stand for any kind of discrimination or Islamophobia. Again, grovelling to the invaders. That's basically what that is for electoral purposes. They don't see any mileage in grovelling to the native British population. They see the invaders as their protection against the British population. I think that is a step change that we're going to see with the election of a Labour government. And you can also just around the point home, there's a third example here, and this is this lady. Seems like a very strange lady to me. That's Rachel Maskrell. I forget which her constituency is. You can look her up. You can look up this video that she's done. It's not hard to find. What she says is 20,000, 30,000, it's not enough. What does it matter if we have to wait longer for our hospital appointment? What does it matter if schools are more crowded? What does it matter if we have to pay more taxes? We must keep going until we really are at saturation point. That is going all in with the invaders. So that's their philosophical outlook. But what you also have, a thing that I think will drive them eventually to take the plunge for really much higher numbers, is the economic argument. Now, the Labour Party and the Tories have been going on for years about growth. I think in July 2022, Keir Starmer got up and said, I have 3 policy prescriptions for this country: growth and growth. And then again in the speech, he said growth and growth. And then a few months later, Liz Truss picked up on that and she did a mini budget in the autumn of 2022 and nearly collapsed the economy. And since then, you've seen Keir Starmer coming out saying, I want to see, we're going to see more growth. So that was Keir Starmer in July 2022. Labour would prioritise growth. And that's Liz Truss. And you had Keir Starmer there saying, there is no task more central to my ambitions for Britain, so there's no task more central, than making the country and its people better off. To do all that, we need 3 things: growth. So echoing Tony Blair's education. How did that work out? And Keir Starmer, he's saying that again this year, only about a month ago. So that is the only policy that I can see that the Labour Party have come out with. That they're not talking about what they would do. Apart from that, I think they see we've got to get the economy growing. Now, that growth to them doesn't mean what it means to us. What you think it means is that your standard of living grows. No, they actually mean your standard of living will go down. That's what they ideally what they want. They want the size of the economy to grow. So they want to grow in the same way that Africa has a larger GDP than Luxembourg, but a Luxembourger is richer than an African. So they want to import more people, which impoverishes you, but increases the overall size of the economy. And then they can say, look how GDP has grown and look how successful companies are. The problem is that they don't have any way of achieving that. They haven't outlined how they're going to achieve growth. I mean, there's one there. That's a Sky News report from I forget let me look up from just over about a month and a half ago. And what they're saying, while Sir Keir likes to make long speeches diagnosing the maladies brought to us in Britain after 14 years of Tory rule, he's less good at giving us remedies. And then his own answer is greater devolution of powers to local leaders to better deliver local growth and level up communities. So basically what he's saying there is instead of the man in the bowler hat from Westminster saying, hey, you can't do that, they will allow the man in your local town hall in the bowler hat to say, hey, you can't do that. That's how they're saying it's pathetic. No way is that going to accomplish economic growth. And the other one you have there is, again, they criticise, this is in The Spectator, where she says, if you bear with me just a second, what she says is the problem is, that's The Spectator talking about Rachel Reeves. She is relatively, I would say, the most intelligent of the Labour bunch. She at least has some idea of like which way to hold a pencil and which economic tools won't stab her straight in the eye, which I don't think the other ones have. I don't think Keir Starmer does. But I think she does. I think she's relatively rational. She realises you can't just print and spend a load of money, for instance, and she said she's not going to do that. But she doesn't have any policy prescriptions. What she's saying is the actual proposals are painfully thin. She wants to beef up the powers of the Office for Budget Responsibility so that every budget proposal is subject to even more scrutiny, and Reeves wants to set up a new growth committee within the Treasury. And here they're mocking her because everyone knows it is the desperate shortage of civil servants sitting around the tables in number 11 Downing Street that has been holding back investment. Well, yeah, well said, Spectator. Yeah, that's quite right. What she's saying is we'll employ more civil servants to talk about growth, and growth will materialise. So I said she was relatively intelligent. That is intelligent compared to the others. The point is they don't know how to achieve the growth that they know they need to deliver. They've got to deliver it. They have no policies, and they have no wiggle room. They have no room for manoeuvre. So they can't. They can't raise borrowing. They can't borrow and spend. There's this from The Guardian from March. UK government borrows more in February than forecast, with the highest debts since the 1960s. And it says there, Jeremy Hunt has been handed disappointing news from the public finances after government borrowing was higher than expected in February, leaving the national debt at the highest level since the 1960s. So there is not the room to borrow. And you're getting that, for instance, you're getting that from international investors as well, warning governments about the high levels of public debt. And what they say there is government debt issuance that in the US and the UK is expected to soar to the highest level on record in the coming year, with the exception of the early stages of the COVID pandemic. So you're getting the British government just trying to push a lot of debt, a lot of bonds into the economy. If it does too much of that, the cost of the price of those bonds plummets, and you get another crisis like you did under Liz Truss. And so there just isn't the room to borrow more money, even if debt levels and deficit levels weren't at record highs. I could do story after story about that. The bottom line is that there's no room to borrow and spend money into the economy. They can't achieve growth that way. And they can't achieve growth by through taxing, because taxes are already at record highs. How taxes have soared to a near record high under Tory rule, and all you need to do is look at that chart there. What it shows is the highest tax burden since 1948. In case you don't remember, up to 1945 there was a Second World War, so 1948 we're paying off all that debt. The difference was then You had a lot of people coming out of the army and going into the productive economy, and a lot of spending had been ploughed into fighting a war, and that ended in 1945. None of that. You're not getting an increase of people going into the productive economy now, and you're not getting public spending plummeting. So that line is probably only going to increase. We'll probably hit levels of tax that there were during World War II. There isn't the room to tax and spend either. They can't borrow and spend, they can't tax and spend either, and there isn't the room to reduce taxes. Otherwise, if there was, taxes wouldn't be at those record highs. So there isn't really anything they can do to create growth. And then at the other end, the demands for spending, which Labour can't resist, those are growing as well. They really are in like a triple vice. So if I look at a few of the demands on spending, they have with Labour with the NHS. The NHS, that's the holy altar of the welfare state, and Labour loves to claim credit for that. Labour promises to hit 18 weeks NHS waiting target within 5 years. What that means is, latest figures show that 43% of those on waiting list have been on it longer than 18 weeks. And the NHS target, which calls for 92% of patients, i.e. to decrease that number from 43 down to 8% within 18 weeks, that is what Labour are saying they will hit within 5 years. That's going to take a lot of spending. So there's no way they can reduce taxes or reduce borrowing. They can't find extra money to borrow and spend into the economy. And similarly, you have that with NHS funding faces biggest real terms cuts since the 1970s. That was only from a couple of years ago. So the pressure for more spending on unproductive things. Health spending is generally not productive. It is not economically productive. It doesn't produce things. It makes people feel better. It makes people more comfortable. It gets people out of pain. That is a good thing, but it's not a productive thing. It doesn't go to economic growth, which is the only thing that Labour are saying they're going to promise. Growth, growth, growth. And then you see councils' town hall debt at staggering levels. And when councils go bust, it is central government, the Treasury, Rachel Reeves, they pick up the tab. And the headline figure there is BBC analysis shows UK councils owe a combined 97.8 billion to lenders, equivalent to around 1.4 grand per person. You can bet it's a lot higher than that, because that might be the headline figure that they owe to lenders, but there'll also be a lot of debt that they've accumulated within their departments. Say, contracts they've taken on, but they're going to pay off in the long term. Or where they might have gone to someone and said, we won't give you a pay rise, we'll allow you to retire early on full pay, or we'll give you a pension increase, putting it off into the never never. I would say that debt is at least double that figure, probably treble. So that's the health service, that's local authorities. The next one is state pensions. The year the state pensions will start to collapse, whoever wins the election. The Telegraph are saying that will be 2035. Okay, so the state pension could become unaffordable as soon as 2035 if Labour and the Tories pledge to protect the triple lock in their election manifestos. They're going further than that. The Tories have gone further than that, and they've had a kind of a tax credit on top of it. They can't get rid of the triple lock because pensioners are a very powerful voting bloc. And then there are ministers urge government to increase defence spending in highly unusual intervention. So it's defending, pensions, health, local authorities. There is a lot of pressure for a lot of spending. So there's no way, and that spending, none of it. Spending on defence, that's not productive. That's for war. War is not productive. Local authorities in general, you might like what they do, it does not contribute to growth. That is what Labour is saying they're going to do. So the other alternatives, I think there are three alternatives. One is to put in place extraordinary measures. One would be quantitative easing, which is what happened in 2008. that's when you get your central bank to print up money and to make it available to commercial banks to borrow and lend to their customers. So you're lending money into the economy. Businesses can get access to loans and they increase activity that way. That is too politically unpopular. It's seen as socialism for the rich, because it is, and it's seen as bailouts for the big banks, just encouraging risk-taking and excess amongst the big banks. And that is what it does. It was far too unpopular to repeat it during COVID, so they had to do it, but they also did it with a lot of the second option, which is printing and spending. That is where the central bank prints up the money, hands it to central government. Government then sprays it out to individuals and says, here, go and spend this money, the stimulus checks, stimmy checks. And that resulted a small amount, or a short burst of that during the COVID pandemic. That resulted in a long burst of high inflation. And Britain suffered worse with high inflation because we did it the most. We did it the worst. We didn't do it through any kind of lending mechanism. The Bank of England printed up $500 million and just advanced it, i.e. gave it to the Treasury, to central government, who then spent it. And as a result, there was a lot of inflation. And we don't have falling inflation. Inflation is still relatively high. They can't do that again. I don't think Rachel Reeves will do that. If they do that, it's going to create far bigger problems than the little bit of growth it's able to create. The third thing they can do is mass immigration, because mass immigration, one of its functions is quantitative easing with people. So in 2008, there was quantitative easing with money. In 2021, there was printing money and spending it into the economy. If you don't want to play around with money, you can bail out businesses through mass immigration, and that's one of its functions, because it has a lot of functions. Again, its main underlying function is to grind you down, to impoverish you, to make you more dependent, more divided, to get rid of your sense of identity, to make you more reliant upon the state. Because if you depend on the state, you won't turn on the state, and that's the basic idea. It's part of a war of attrition against you, the voter. And the idea is that you won't rebel against that, because we won't want to cut the umbilical cord between us and the welfare state. We'll be too scared to do that. So we will put up with whatever those enemy politicians do to us. That is the main function of it. But a secondary economic function is that when you import a lot of people into the economy, you make everyone poorer, no doubt about it. You import millions of low IQ, poorly educated people who are barely literate in their own language, and you stuff them into the economy. They don't take up skilled occupations. All they do is dilute wages by making the mass of ordinary people, by making poorer people poorer. That's the main effect, that they crush wages. Now that is a way to give a bailout to big businesses, not the smaller businesses that are selling labour or consulting, but manufacturing businesses, because you get more demand for goods, houses, cars, shoes, clothes, bicycles, mobile phones. There's more demand for those things, so they can sell more of them and they can keep the prices up. And at the other end, having more people coming into the economy, that reduces the wages that those businesses have to pay out in order to make those things. So the profit margins go up and the share prices go up as a result. It's like quantitative easing, and it's very, very tempting to governments, because it's a way they can say, look how we are increasing the size of the economy. It impoverishes you, but they can say we have increased GDP. Look how successful these companies are. They're more profitable. Their share price is increasing. We have accomplished growth. We have done it. Crucially, without having to print any money that risks inflation. But in effect, it means that the money that businesses have goes further. They can do more with it. It is a handout to larger businesses. And you can see the effect of it. If I go here, now that's from The Spectator, a fellow called, I think, Fraser at The Spectator, who posted that graph. This is quite a good little graph to look at. What it shows is GDP. GDP is what the economy is worth, what it produces every year. GDP per capita, well, Per capita, there are some people who won't understand that, but I think the people watching this will. That's GDP per person. So, and the red line, what that shows is GDP for the last, really since about 2021. GDP has been increasing by about 1.5% to 2% per year, but GDP per person, i.e. what you're worth, what you're getting, what you can be paid, what you can be paid for, that is reducing by about 2%, 1.5% to 2% per year. Of course, the projections show the lines turning around, going up to the ceiling. They're not, that GDP one might start going up towards the ceiling, but GDP per capita, I think that will continue to go down, because as you import more people, you put more pressure on all kinds of things that people need, and you reduce people's pay. You make people poorer, even though you have more people in the economy, making the economy bigger. You make the pie bigger, but you don't make it any sweeter. You don't make your slice of the pie any bigger. Your slice of the pie gets smaller, even though the pie overall gets bigger. And that is the purpose of mass immigration. So they can boast about about economic growth, but at the same time they can grind you down. It's a very effective process for that, and it doesn't create problems like inflation. So I would expect government, a Labour government, to do a lot of that. I can see them in the first couple of years, when in the honeymoon period, thinking, well, we don't need to do this, we've got a thumping great majority. Doesn't matter if we're not delivering on our promise of growth, the only promise we made, the thing we said we were absolutely going to deliver. Doesn't matter if we don't deliver on that. But after a while, they'll start, if they get halfway through the term, say after a couple of years, they're going to start saying, actually, we need to be able to say we've accomplished some kind of growth. And I think it is mass immigration they will look for, because the finances will be no better then. And that is what they're going to do to us. And when there will be the inevitable backlash, because people will feel poorer. They will feel their neighbours are no longer home. People will feel, I think people are starting to sense that this is hostile action, a kind of war against us. And the only thing they'll be able to do is to stamp on that, their reflex reaction, as you saw from that lady, Rayner, and the other two ladies, the one that I quoted, saying that we want to reach saturation point with immigration and asylum. They're going to stamp on dissent. They're going to stamp harder. And I think that is in Keir Starmer's nature. If you look at his, again, don't forget that graph. That is a useful graph. GDP may be going up, you are getting poorer. That's what that says. Now, Keir Starmer, I don't think he's concerned about the problems that mass immigration brings. I think he quite likes them. He was Director of Public Prosecutions from about 2008 till 2012. I think when the Muslim rape gangs really started to get prosecuted, and although it's a myth, some people said that he tried to block the prosecutions. I don't think there is any evidence of that. But what you have is a peculiar passivity on his part. The DPP is a political placeman. The Attorney General, who's an MP, appoints the DPP. And the purpose, the idea is that the DPP, as a political appointee, then keeps the prosecution service in touch with the political feelings of the nation. So if you get sensitive cases coming before the courts, the DPP is all over them like a rash. Now, Starmer should have been all over those Muslim rape gangs like a cheap suit, but he just seems to have kind of stood back right before he retired. He gave some sort of milk and water guidance, which treated it as just another form of sexual assault, not getting to grips with it. He was he seems to me to have been completely blind to the aspect of ethnicity, the fact that it is an invader war against British people. There was not a hint of any awareness of that, or of any awareness of any concern about that. So I don't think his point of view is going to change there. But what I do think is likely to happen is that he will simply stamp down on any dissent. The evidence I have for that is when he was DPP, again, he never, as far as I'm aware, he never recommended what was called the Telecommunications Act of 2003 get repealed. So I think he was DPP for 4 years, a bit over 4 years. And during that period, he seemed quite happy going along with the Telecommunications Act. If you look up the Telecommunications Act, what that is, that's very broadly drafted legislation that was put in place in '84 when BT, around the time that BT was privatised, because there was a Tory moral panic about, and you might remember, heavy breathing phone calls, and they worried that if they sold off BT to a private operator, that private operator might take a lax view of nuisance phone calls, heavy breathing phone calls. So they passed this legislation saying if you use electronic communications equipment for an offensive purpose, then you are guilty of an offence. And so what that means today is if you use if you use your landline, your smartphone, your laptop, your iPad, just anything that might have a battery in it, and you say something that about someone that they might find offensive. So if you telephone me and you say, I don't like black people, and I say, yeah, I agree, we're both guilty of an offence under that legislation. It's absurd legislation. There's no way that legislation should be on the books. It's a sledgehammer, not even to crack a nut. It's a sledgehammer for no reason at all. And it's retained, and Starmer seems to have been peculiarly comfortable with that. It was only right at the end of his tenure, suspiciously in my eyes, he issued some guidance saying, well, we need to strike a balance here. No, the balance that needed to be struck was that legislation needed to be got rid of. And every time it was renewed, I think the DPP was consulted, and I don't think he ever once said, no, this needs to be just taken off the roll. It shouldn't be. It needs to be repealed. He never said. I can't find any report where he said that. So that to me is evidence that he is comfortable using very repressive measures, very repressive legislation to stamp out dissent. And I get a nasty feeling that feeling is enhanced by this report from the Telegraph. That's Keir Starmer's plan for a decade in power. I find it easy to be ruthless. And there's a picture of him posing in front of some fake bookshelves, pulling his ruthless face. That is the sign of an incompetent. He is an incompetent man. He does not have a fine touch on what he's dealing with. He doesn't have any imagination. He doesn't have the ability to come up with solutions. He's very crude. He's very brutish. I call him the fat Stalin. Very Stalinist. He likes kind of Stalinist methods. I'm ruthless on behalf of the people. That is the incompetent Stalinist approach that I think he has. That is the hallmark of the incompetent. He says, look what a tough guy I am. Haven't I got big muscles? I'll get you. That's not the sign of a tough guy. That's a sign of just someone who's a bit dim, really, a bit of a brute. And that's what I think he is. He will be comfortable being ruthless towards the likes of you and me if we speak out of line. And you see further evidence of that from the Rochdale by-election. If you remember the one where George Galloway won and the Labour candidate got axed because he said something that Keir Starmer didn't like about Israel, and so they just withdrew Labour support for their candidate. And the result was that the Labour candidate tanked. I don't think he quite lost his deposit, but he came, was it third or fourth place? I mean, Labour should have won that. Instead of saying, actually, I'm not going to stamp on this guy. He's saying things I don't like. I'll stand back. I'll hold my breath. I'll just let him do what he needs to do in order to win. I can get him under control afterwards. No, he stamped on him. That's a sign of somebody who's not really very able, not very competent, doesn't investigate, doesn't find out what's happening, doesn't have a fine touch on what's happening. His instinct is to stamp down hard, and that's what I think he will do. That's what I think will happen after Labour get elected. Just to recap, I think they like this idea of mass immigration. Labour, I think the Tories were part of the uniparty enemy against us, wanting to grind us down through mass immigration. I think the difference is Labour see mass immigration as their defence against the rest of us. They see that we don't like what they're inflicting on us, and so they're throwing their lot in with all of the invaders in the hopes that the invaders will kind of act as a buffer or a shield against us, the native British population. That's a stupid policy. It's not going to work. But tell me that this lady Rayner, tell me what if I show you that lady there, tell me what those men are thinking about her there. I shudder to think. It is not going to work. But that is, I think, the way they think. Now they want They're saying we're going to deliver growth. They can't deliver growth. The only way they can deliver anything like growth is just by flooding the country with more people. I think they will do that because the more people you have, the economy will grow a little bit. Then they can say that there is economic growth, and they know that will create social problems that people don't like, and they will stamp down on us. So if there are people on our side saying great, celebrating the Tories getting a kicking in a couple of months, or a bit over a month's time, then don't celebrate that. That is nothing to celebrate. The Tories certainly deserve a kicking. They are our enemy, but Labour are even slightly more our enemy, I would say. The overall message is what I would like to do is to try to bring forward the inevitable date where you look at the state and the welfare state and you say it is not worth it. I don't care how many spending promises they make. I don't care how many hernia operations. I don't care how many of my ingrowing toenails that they promise they're going to deal with. It is not worth it. I will pay for my own medical care. I don't want money and freebies from these people because they are my enemy. That day is coming at some stage. What I want is what I'd like to do is to appeal to us to bring forward that date where we say we've had it, we're not going to go along with them anymore, it is not worth it, and the welfare nose tube is not sufficient recompense for the harm they're doing us. I hope that's the point I've made. That is, you are going to come to that point of view at some stage. Labour are going to force you to come to that point of view, and the sooner the better, in my view. Thank you.